What's up guys, Joker here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the PC performance for Watch Dogs 2, which is available now at the time of recording this video on November 29th. It came out a couple of weeks ago for the consoles on the Xbox One and the PS4, so we had to wait a couple weeks just to get the game available to us on the PC, presumably so Ubisoft could spend a little bit more time optimizing this game. So that is what we are going to be focusing on here today, just the PC performance. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions for you out there that are wondering whether or not you'll be able to run this particular game on your system. We will be running this in my main system here with the i7 6800K. I have that overclocked up to 4.3 gigahertz along with 32 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. And we will be testing on the GTX 1080, RX480, and GTX 1060 here at the Ultra preset within the Watch Dogs 2 menus, which we're going to jump into right now so that we can do a quick overview of the options that we are using. You can see that I am running in full screen, but they've also got borderless window, full screen borderless, and multi-monitor borderless, or a windowed mode, whichever one of those you want to use. And you can swap between different displays on the fly, which is always nice to have. We do have 1440 here, which I'm running at right now, and they do have high refresh rate support. So you could do 144 hertz, and I'm presuming 165 and 200 hertz because you can completely uncap the frame rate. So you shouldn't have to worry about that if you're a high monitor refresh rate user out there. We do have an FOV slider, which goes from 70 all the way up to 110, but all of my testing was done at 90, and you can adjust the pixel density, which is basically a resolution scaler that can go from 25% all the way up to 125%, but everything we did here was at 1%, at a 1 pixel density, which would be the native resolution of 1440 or 1080, depending on what we were testing at. In the quality options here, we can see the graphics quality. I have it set to custom, but this is really just the Ultra preset with the depth of field and motion blur turned off, which I always turn off in all of my performance testing. I chose not to do everything cranked up manually because in my initial gameplay testing, I was getting dips down into the 30s at 1440p with a GTX 1080. It was absolutely brutal cranking up some of these additional options like the extra detail slider, putting the headlight shadows up to 4 cars instead of 2 cars like it is on by default. So having some of those additional options on really did hamper our performance quite a bit, even on a GTX 1080. So we are just using the Ultra preset with depth of field and motion blur disabled here for all of our performance testing. But you can see that I've got the geometry up at Ultra, terrain, vegetation, and texture resolution. This was available via the Ultra texture pack that you do have to download separately from the main game. It's mixed in with the DLC over on Steam, which is where I would advise most of you to pick this game up so that you can get a refund if the game doesn't run well for you or if you don't like it for whatever reason. You can see we also got texture filtering, shadows, the headlight shadows, water reflections, screen space reflections, and the San Francisco fog. Once again, depth of field and motion blur were turned off, and we've also got bloom. Ambient occlusion was set to HMSSAO, which was the Ultra preset, but we've also got SSBC and HBAO+, which would be an Nvidia specific technology, and we've got temporal filtering on with SMAA. There's also FXAA available, but personally I like SMAA. That's my favorite form of anti-aliasing. If you do want to run the temporal filtering off, you do have the option of choosing MSAA, MSAA 4 times, 8 times, as well as TXAA 2 times, 4 times, and 8 times. But since I was using the temporal filtering option, it went ahead and disabled the multi-sample anti-aliasing, so we just use SMAA for all of our testing. But let's go ahead and jump in now and take a look at the performance numbers, and you may be noticing that we do not have our traditional Afterburner overlay. The reason for that is that it is not working at the time of release on this particular game. I'm really not sure. There's a lot of people talking about it on the Steam forums as well as NeoGAF about the Afterburner and Riva Tuner statistics server overlay is just not working in this game. So we're not able to get the traditional, side-by-side comparison like I usually like to do in these videos where I can show you all of the detailed information. So we are going to be limited as far as to what I can actually show you, but we could still go over our average and minimum FPS numbers, which I tested using Fraps in a benchmark run throughout the city of San Francisco. So we will start off here with the RX480 at 1080p, where we saw an average of 42 FPS and a minimum of 34, while at 1440p we saw an average of 30 FPS and a minimum of 23. So you can see that the RX480 is really struggling with this game. The GPU usage is getting fully utilized. It is pushing the card up to 99%, and I regularly saw my CPU on the i7-6800K at about 50 to 60%. So it is using quite a bit CPU, but it is fully pinning out the GPU on this game. But it'll be up to you to decide whether or not the performance that we're seeing is really justified by the visuals in this particular title. Personally, I'm of the mindset that it's not. I don't think this game looks any better than something like Grand Theft Auto 5, which runs a hell of a lot better than Watch Dogs 2. We're going to continue on here now to the GTX 1060 at 1080p, where we saw an average of 47 FPS and a minimum of 40, so it did fare better than the RX 480, so this would be an Nvidia victory as far as the RX 480 versus GTX 1060 is concerned, but still not able to maintain an average of 60 FPS. We only got an average of 47 here with the minimum at 40. At the Ultra, at 1440p Ultra, once again, we saw an average of 34 FPS and a minimum of 27. So the RX 480 and GTX 1060 are both struggling to run this game at Ultra at an average of 60 FPS. I would certainly look to run this game down on maybe the very high or even the high preset if you're wanting to get a smoother frame rate at 60 FPS. Playing this on the GTX 1060 at 1080p with a G-Sync monitor was not really an issue. It would stay fairly smooth as a result of using G-Sync. But if you're out there, not using G-Sync, you're probably going to want to go ahead and tweak some options in order to get closer to your monitor's native refresh rate, 60 FPS or otherwise. Now switching over to the GTX 1080, it did fare better, obviously, than the lower-end cards, but at 1080p, we only saw an average of 66 FPS with a minimum of 54, so not even able to maintain over 60 frames per second all of the time using a GTX 1080, which is very unfortunate to see. And at 1440p, it didn't fare any better, seeing an average of 51 FPS and a minimum of 42. Now, there are certain times in the game, you will see it, at 1440p going up to even 80 or 90 FPS if you're doing things like indoor activities. But when you're actually out in the world of the game, you will see drops, every now and then below into the 50s and possibly even into the 40s like we saw in our performance numbers here. Right now, I'm actually driving around in the game world and I'm recording the Afterburner statistics off of a second screen using my DSLR, so that I can kind of at least illustrate to you the GPU usage. As you can see, it is getting fully utilized. At the VRAM count, I'm constantly seeing at 1440p on my GTX 1080 is up around 5,500 to 6,000 megabytes, so roughly 5.5 to 6 gigs of VRAM being utilized. But the GPU is getting fully pushed here, so it's not seeing any massive lag spikes like we saw in the original Watch Dogs, which was really one of the big performance issues with that particular title, is that it really didn't matter what system you had. When you would drive around in the city and there'd be lots of cars and things on screen, you would really see the frame rate just drop out of nowhere, which made it for a very unpleasant experience. I could say that that's not something I'm experiencing in this game, so it does appear to at least be somewhat better optimized than the original Watch Dogs, so it is certainly playable if you're willing to get in there and tweak some options, lower down some graphics settings if you are on a lower end GPU. Just don't expect to go out there if you've got like a 1060, RX 480, GTX 970, R9 390, something like that, and be able to just crack the game up at Ultra and maintain 60 FPS even at 1080p. You're just not going to be able to do that, so just be prepared for lowering some options, but you can get the game to run smooth if you lower options. It scales reasonably well, so I really don't have an issue recommending this game, but it's not performing as well as I would like to see personally. I think this game could have maybe used a couple more weeks in the oven over at the Ubisoft factory, so maybe they could have optimized this a little bit better. Maybe we'll see some further advancements as far as the PC performance is concerned in the future. Maybe we'll see some further optimization there on the driver side as well from Nvidia as well as AMD. But at least we are seeing the GPUs get fully pushed here, so it really just seems to be a really taxing game, and you guys can just let me know down in the comments below if you think the performance impact we're seeing is justified here by the visuals that we're seeing in Watch Dogs 2. It's a nice looking game, and I've been having a lot of fun playing it so far up to this point. The missions seem a lot of fun, so it's a game I would probably maybe recommend picking up, or maybe wait for a sale, something along those lines. I haven't seen any really big discounts on the key sites like CD Keys. If you buy it in the US on CD Keys, you're going to pay about $57 versus the EU. You could get it for about $45. So you could save a little bit of money buying it if you are from Europe, but in the States here, your best bet is probably picking this game up on Steam, so you can get the full refund for whatever reason. If you don't like the game, if it's not running properly for you, you'll have the ability to go ahead and get a refund. But I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. Please let me know your thoughts once again down in the comments below on Watch Dogs 2, if you're going to be picking it up or what system you're going to be running it on and the type of performance that you're seeing, so we can get a good database of numbers here, maybe for some other people that have questions out there down in the comments. But I'll catch you guys next time. Ta-ra.